I'm Franco Terrazzano, the Federal Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and today we're here with a simple message for the government: no taxation without representation. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation is taking the Canada Revenue Agency to court for enforcing the undemocratic and illegal capital gains tax hike. The capital gains tax hike blows a hole through a fundamental principle of Canada's democracy while also blowing a hole in Canada's economy. No taxation without representation isn't just an important principle or a catchy slogan. It's enshrined in the Constitution of Canada. It's Parliament's job to approve tax increases, but the government failed to introduce the legislation, debate the legislation, pass the legislation, or proclaim the legislation into law. And with an election right around the corner, it likely never will. Yet unelected bureaucrats at the CRA are taking billions of dollars from Canadians with this undemocratic tax hike. This is a tax hike that will drag down our economy. This is a tax hike that punishes Canadians who work their entire lives to save for their retirements. This is a tax hike that will push young, smart Canadian graduates who want to start the next Google to leave Canada and set up businesses in other countries. To put it bluntly, this tax hike is a financial sucker punch to many Canadians who worked hard to invest in properties, create businesses, or save for their retirement. The capital gains tax hike will affect more than 1 million Canadians, half of whom earn less than $117,000 every year, according to a recent report from the C.D. Howe Institute. The capital gains tax hike will blow a $90 billion hole in Canada's economy. The capital gains tax hike will mean 400,000 fewer jobs. The Trudeau government has no one to blame for this mess but itself. The government chose not to pass the capital gains tax hike with the budget. The government chose to prorogue Parliament. Canadians should not have to pay for this government's mistake. Canadians should not have to pay for a tax increase that was never passed by Parliament and likely never will. The Trudeau government should tell the CRA to not enforce the capital gains tax hike. But so far, the Trudeau government has refused to do the right thing, despite both Conservatives and now even some Liberals criticizing the undemocratic capital gains tax hike. We at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation are not going to let unelected bureaucrats take more money from Canadians with an illegal tax grab. And that's why the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is launching this legal challenge. And with that, I'll hand the floor over to my colleague, CTF General Counsel Devin Drover, who will explain the details of this legal fight.
Thank you, Franco. It's official. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has filed an application with federal court seeking judicial review of the CRA's enforcement of this undemocratic and illegal capital gains tax hike. We are bringing this case on behalf of Debbie Vorsteveld, a hardworking Canadian from Mapleton, Ontario. For 14 years, Debbie and her husband William owned a property that included two homes, one where they lived and the other that they rented to their adult children as they helped them save for homes of their own. Last year, with the children now moved out, the Vorstevelds sold that property. They were hoping to move forward onto the next chapter of their lives and inch closer to retirement. Instead, they are now facing an unexpected and unfair financial burden. This family will pay thousands in extra taxes because the CRA is choosing to impose this capital gains tax hike that was not authorized by Parliament. The goal of this legal challenge is to set a precedent to not only help this family, but to protect all Canadians who will be directly burdened by the CRA and this bureaucratic overreach. Let me be clear. This tax hike is illegal. This tax hike violates Canada's Constitution. The CRA is enforcing this tax hike despite legislation never being introduced, debated, or passed by elected representatives in Parliament. Section 53 of the Constitution Act of 1867 is unequivocal. All bills imposing taxes must originate in the House of Commons. This enshrines the principle that only elected representatives have the authority to impose taxes. The CRA has no legal authority to unilaterally implement this tax hike. The required amendments needed to bring about this tax hike, which would be amendments to the Income Tax Act, has not passed, and as my colleague said, likely never will. Yet Bureaucrats at the CRA, who are unelected, are acting as though Parliament's approval is optional. It is not. That's why the Canadian Taxpayers Federation has taken legal action. We are asking the court to issue an order stopping the CRA from enforcing this unconstitutional and illegal tax hike. And we are seeking an expedited hearing to ensure that this matter is resolved quickly, as time is of the essence. Canadians must file their 2024 income tax returns by April 30th, 2025. If the CRA's decision is not struck down by then, Canadians will be coerced into paying a tax hike that has no basis in law, or they'll face financial penalties. We will not stand by and allow unelected bureaucrats to trample on the constitutional rights of Canadian taxpayers. And this legal challenge is about more than just one family or one tax hike. It's about defending the rule of law, protecting the rights of Canadian taxpayers, and ensuring that no one in government, elected or otherwise, is above the Constitution. Thank you.